farmers markets, yeah, CSA, roadside stand, that kind of thing. So that's been my general life experience. And then I left the farm, retired from the farm, and started this consulting and teaching business because I really have fun taking this new part, being a new part of the movement for sustainable agriculture and healthy growing practices and healthy eating. So that's where those are my chops, and a bunch of my work. I would say sort of about half of the work that I do as a farm consultant is in the area of soils and production. And then the other half of the work I do is in money, in profitability, like trying to figure out if you're making money or where you're making money, and then getting into the nitty gritty of QuickBooks and PayPal and balance sheet and all that stuff. So that's kind of those are the main waters that I swim in, and a little bit of kind of one-on-one coaching as well. So I've been invited here to kind of get nerdy with you about soils, and obviously this is aimed towards cut flower growers specifically. And so this talk that I give, all over the place to all kinds of different groups of people has extra flower pictures for you. So the content, if I'm going to talk about soils, right, is soils, right? But I put extra good flower pictures in there to keep you interested. So what makes this the most fun for everybody is this is such a nice, concise, intimate group of people, is if we take this opportunity to pretend that we're all in an actual room together, and that this is an interactive process. So I'm not going to lecture you, and this is not school. We're here thinking about our problems and our excitements together. And so here's the couple of things that are on deck. One is that Rachel, who's for me on my top left, but Rachel from River and Sea, that's right, is that right? River and Sea? Yeah, Flowers sent me her soil test in advance of this session. And so I've had a chance to look at it, but she and I haven't had any kind of a session. So I don't have any other secret knowledge. And we kind of thought, Georgia and I talked about it. Anyway, we have me talking to Rachel about her soil test in front of you as kind of like, cool, right? And then, so we got that box of goodness. And then the other box is I have this whole slide set, which is a PowerPoint slide set. It's pretty good. I made it pretty good over the years. It has some really good pictures, and it has some important concepts about soil health. So we thought it would be the most fun to start with Rachel and me looking at a soil test, because you don't believe me that I really want you to interrupt me during my talk. Because if I just started with the slides, y'all are just going to go eat breakfast, and I don't know, I'll never see you again. So we're going to start with interaction, and then we may, maybe I'll say, oh, we got to go check this thing out on the slide and come back. Anyway, my point is, I want this to be pretty informal, and I would really love for you to interrupt. Okay. And maybe I need to use another word. I would love for you to participate in a timely fashion with what we're talking about. And I'm not going to look at the chat. I can't deal with looking at the chat. I can deal with hands up in the air, or you can do that, somehow on Zoom, you can make your icon of hand come up. George is going to keep an eye on that. And otherwise you can unmute yourself and sort of dive in, because that's how you're going to learn, is by throwing in something that's not making sense or that is perplexing you in some way. And generally speaking, somebody else is having the same question as you. And so it's worth it for all of us to address it together. Does that make sense? Yeah. Anybody else in this group willing to put their face right out here on the screen and give me some eyeball love? Because that's the most fun for me, is if I get to see your faces. Yay! Thank you. All right, I'll take all the faces I can get. Excellent. All right, Rachel, we're putting you right on the spot, right up on, right quick. Is that okay?
That's okay. Here we go.
All right. I didn't even ask permission. Hey, another face. Welcome. Great. Thank you. Okay, so Rachel, I have your soil test. I'm going to share the screen that has your soil test on it. And we're just going to pretend like it's just me and you doing a consult on the phone. I'm going to ask you some questions, and we're going to look at what kinds of things are on this test that are useful. Normally, just for context for this, normally this kind of a phone call consult would take somewhere between a half hour and an hour. Usually it gets to be an hour by the time all is said and done. So we're not going to do the full Monty right this minute, but I want you to get a sense of how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. And I was looking up somebody on this call because I love that word, suelo. All right, here we go. So does that work for you? Can you all see this test? Yeah, okay. So this is from, I don't know, never heard of it. Plant Science Lab.
That's the usual TerraLink lab.
Okay, so Abbotsford, BC. So somewhere in your universe, this is Rachel's test. And it's from March of this year. Okay, so this is pretty concise. I mean, that's it. There's no secret other pages. Like, this is the story right here. So first thing, just to set the stage with Rachel. Rachel, you are a cut flower grower. That's your main crop.
Yeah.
Okay, and is this, how big of a spot does this soil test represent for your farm?
This is our perennial field, and it's, or one of our perennial sections, and it's probably a third of an acre.
Okay. And how long has it been in production?
Various amounts. Okay. So between 4 years and 1 year.
All right. And you are a certified organic, or you're a biological grower, or what's your designation?
I am certified, yeah.
Okay, cool. And how many years have you been at this?
This started in 2016. So this will be, what is that, 6 years, 7 years?
All right, cool. You're starting to know what's going on.
Almost.
Sweet. All right, so let's look at this test. And normally, so I've never worked with this company, but the way they're writing the results out makes it sort of universally understandable. Thank you, thank you, thank you, because it's in parts per million. Okay, so they're not using any weird metric thing that I don't know what it is because I'm a stupid American and we don't do metric. It's parts per million, which is like universal. Everybody knows what parts per million is. So they give you this lovely, let's talk about the nutrients in just a second. I want to set the stage with some kind of what I call the core four of what kind of soil are we working with here? Like, what's the fundamental situation of this soil? So that would be, what's the organic matter? So over here on the far right, organic matter is at 4.1%. Again, I can understand exactly what that means. It's not written in a foreign language. And they are giving you a designation of 4% being low. I would disagree with that assessment and say, holy moly, most people in agriculture are way below 4. If you're a farmer and you're at 4, I am happy. I say, right on, lady, high five, you're doing good. Now, is it cool if you go higher? Of course it's cool. 4 is great. Next part of the core 4, what is your, where do they put CEC? Here it is. CEC right here, CEC, now that is written in some kind of other language, but that's okay, it all works out. 14, CEC is 14, you see that right here? What does CEC stand for? CEC stands for cation exchange capacity, CEC. So we're going to see on some slides what that really looks like. But basically, the what it's describing is the ability of the soil to hold nutrients. How many nutrients can the soil hold at one time? And this is kind of an electrical, physical, biological situation. So cations are positively charged ions, and the soil surface, or the soil, the surface of a soil colloid is negatively charged. And so this is measuring how many cations, how many places are there for cations to be held on the soil. Now, what they don't tell you basic with CEC is that they don't tell you what does 14 mean compared to what? 14 compared to what, right? So the range of CECs in soils goes from basically 0 to 30. A zero CEC soil would be pure sand, like 100% pure beach sand. Sand is dead. Sand is glass. Sand has no CEC. It doesn't hold any nutrients because it's a piece of glass, okay? 30, a CEC of 30, you would find in the peat bog, right? A place that has huge quantities of organic matter, and humus would be 30. So in my world, where I live on the East Coast of the United States, the mid-Atlantic states, a normal CEC is 7. Kind of crap. That's the kind of soil I live on, crap. Mostly because it's been eroded and the good stuff washed away, right? When the white people first came here and started ruining everything, the soil started getting washed away. So our good soil is way long gone. Okay, so 14 CECs, that is sweet. I love it. And the only way so the CEC is based on your sand, silt, and clay, the main ingredients, the physical ingredients of your soil, and organic matter. And the only way that CEC is going to go up over time is through the growing of the organic matter percentage of your soil. Okay, is that sounding like making sense? Everybody's with me? I have another computer over here so I can see more faces. All right, there's another person with their camera on. Yay. Hi, Paulina. Thank you. Okay, so we have darn good organic matter. We have excellent CEC. And Rachel did give me her test from 2 years ago, and your CEC has gone up from 11.8 to 14, along right in step with your organic matter rising. All right, third part of the core 4 would be pH. pH is right here. pH is 6.6. And I imagine out of all the things that we're talking about today, pH is the one that y'all are the most familiar with, that you're used to talking about. Is that correct? You feel slightly knowledgeable and comfortable with that? So pH is the measure of hydrogen ions in the soil. You also can think of it as pH is the power of hydrogen. So this is the acidity versus alkalinity, with 7 being the center, being neutral. And this soil pH at 6.6 means you're just a hair into the acidic side. In my view, this is the perfect number. This is like exactly where I would want to see it. Now, it does sometimes depend on what are you going to grow there? What are you trying to grow there? So if you were trying to grow azaleas, rhododendrons, maybe hydrangeas, maybe you would want to have a little more acidic soil, right? If you want to grow, but this range for people who are growing annuals, I know we're looking at a perennial field, but if you're growing a lot of cut flowered annuals, I would want you to be in the middle 6s. So 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 8, 6, 9, 7. Anything above 7, you start to get some some nutrient availability issues. And so I love being at 6.6. This is right on. So far I am super pumped about this test. The last piece of the core 4 is phosphorus. Here's the phosphorus number right here. It's the second one on this middle section here. And this is 196 parts per million. This is lots of phosphorus. So I don't know if your soil was born rich in phosphorus, because I haven't, I didn't meet it a long time ago. I imagine, Rachel, is this a reflection, do you think, of your organic matter additions?
Yes, very much. Yeah.
Okay. So where we stand, so basically 196 parts per million is a lot of phosphorus. It's in where I live in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which I don't expect you guys to ever heard of it, because I haven't heard of where you live either. But it's a beautiful and special watershed. It's like a bay that's really shallow, which is super cool. And it means there's lots of crabs and interesting beings. And it's getting poisoned with phosphorus and nitrogen from farming. And so where I live, phosphorus is a regulated nutrient. And at this number right here, 196, you would be having a red flag raised to the state. And the state would say, okay, Miss Rachel, you're going to have to be very, very careful about putting out more phosphorus than, because you already have a bunch. Okay, so you don't live where anybody's going to put a red flag, which is interesting, because I always think Canada is going to put more red flags than America, but I live in a very strange state. All right, so we don't need any more phosphorus probably for the rest of your career. If you never put another lick of phosphorus down, you'd be fine. And so so there's the core 4, which basically says this soil is beautiful. Okay, I love this soil. And I feel like everything is going to go really good. All right, so that's our base. So there's when I talk about the base, it's like, is there something really wrong here that we need to fix, right? So that would mean no phosphorus or a really weird pH. Those are things that we're gonna hit it hard, and we're gonna try to fix it right off the bat. We don't need to fix anything. This sucker is looking good. So let's look into this, the rest of these blue bars and the rest of the cations and anions. They have them both mixed together here, and see what is it that we see. So the corporation, this company, the soil testing company is yes, they're giving you the raw data, but they're also giving you, like, how do I think about the raw data? Like, so 6 parts per million nitrogen, is that good or is it not so good? So they give you this cool bar chart. Very helpful. So your nitrogen is showing up as low. By and large, pretty much nobody thinks about how much nitrogen shows up on a test. So I say disregard it. Why? Because nitrogen is changing form and moving like every minute. And it's sort of pointless to ever think that you have your finger on the pulse. Like, you'd have to measure nitrogen a lot, like over and over and over again over the course of the season to get any sense of how's it going out there. So I don't pay any attention. We already did our phosphorus, and we have a bunch of other nutrients here, including some of the micros. They put all the micros here at the end. What's a micronutrient? A micronutrient is like iron for us. So it's a nutrient. Just because it has the word micro next to it doesn't mean it's not important. It means that it's not found in huge quantities in the soil. Okay, so just like in our bodies, if we burned ourselves down and you took what little bits of minerals were left, iron wouldn't be a huge part of it, but what happens if we don't have iron in our systems, right? We're anemic and things don't work right. So that's the same here for plants. So as we look across the board here, basically everything is rocking except for sulfur and boron and manganese. Forget about that nitrogen piece. So there's, out of all the things that there are that they're measuring, you're like, on just 3 of those things, which is pretty deluxe, right? We already know that that's pretty deluxe. And so what we would do, then let me look at one other place. I want to look here. So this section right here, which is, they don't even label it here. This is the most bare bones but good test result page I've seen in a long time. This section here doesn't even give you the name, but this is your base saturation percentage. Okay, right in here. What this means is, remember, we have the CEC, we have the exchange complex on the surface of the soil. And then this is telling us who's on that exchange complex in what percentages. So 70% of your exchange complex is calcium, 12% is magnesium, 1% is sodium, 5% is potassium. Now, again, is that good? Is that not good? Is it okay? Is it not okay? And here they have their suggested ranges. And these ranges are very generous, shall I say. Like they don't want to stick their neck out and give you a smaller window, but I'm going to stick my neck out. And I'm going to say, I love this range for calcium, 65 to 75% is beautiful. 12, I would like to see magnesium somewhere between 12 and 16%. So this is right in the beautiful sweet spot. Sodium at 1 is fine. We just don't want it to go high, super high, because then we got a salt problem. Potassium, I'd like to see at about 5%. So basically, everything looks like awesome, pretty darn perfect. There's only a couple things across the board that we see that are short. So now is when I would say to Rachel, well, how's it going out there? So this is a chemistry test, but I want to hear from you, Rachel. How is it growing? How's it growing? Are you getting good plants? You have good health? Are you having good production? What's happening from your perspective?
It seems pretty good. Yeah, there's always some issues, and I think most of the issues are caused by the nitrogen, like a general nitrogen deficiency, because we're not doing a good job at adding it after things are planted. So we get aphids on a few crops, and we just end up abandoning them. But otherwise, everything looks okay.
Let's go backwards a little bit. I'm gonna look at you over here. So what makes you say you're not good at it? And then what makes you, and then tell me about how you think the aphids are hooking in.
So what do I think I'm not good at is when I say nitrogen?
Yeah. What makes you say that?
Because I know that a lot of nitrogen leaches out over the winter, and I can see the plant growth after the first year is often not great on some of the herbaceous perennials.
So you think it's like running out of gas in a way after year 1? Okay. All right. And otherwise, plant health is pretty good.
Yeah. I think so.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to just turn this off for a second and get back to just faces. So at this point in the phone call, we would start strategizing about what are we going to do, right? So we have the test, we have Rachel's story, which is, stuff's going pretty good, could be better. You have a little bit of aphid problems, and you observe that the plants could be more robust, especially year 2. Yeah. So this is when we would start to think about, well, what do we want to do? What are we going to do about this? And that's when things get complicated because now we have people, now we got equipment, now we got expense, now we got supply chain, now we got issues. Okay. And this is why somebody hires me, is because I help them sort of parse this out. So I don't think it makes sense for us as a group to go there together today, but I just want you to know that that's what would come up next. So what I would work with Rachel on is, can we get you some nitrogen, sulfur, boron, and manganese? Those are the things we know from the chemistry test are lacking. From a biological standpoint, it sounds like things are, the soil feels good. I would want to ask you about that. What does it feel like the soil is from a textural standpoint?
Yeah, so we are very, very heavy clay. Like my kids make pots out of it in the summer out of irrigation leaks. And so it's a bit compacted, and it is very difficult to add any amendments unless they're just getting chucked on top of the soil.
Yeah. Okay. And you have other parts of the farm where you are doing annual cultivating?
Yeah.
Okay. And are you using tillage in that system?
Yeah, outside we are. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll get into a little bit about tillage shortly, which is a hot and very interesting topic. And I have 1,000 things to think about it. Yeah, so this is where we would, and obviously Rachel would have more than this test. She would have, her annual field, and she may have another field. And so the more tests you have and the more different they are from each other, as you can imagine, things can get even more complicated. And so usually what we end up doing is I end up making a spreadsheet that would have all your different plots, all the different fertilizers, like this, and then fill in what's missing, which things do you need on which plots in what quantities. So we're not going to do that right this minute, but that's how this would go. And the reason why I have a job is because places like this, sometimes they'll offer you recommendations, right? You can check a box that says, send me the recommendations. But the problem is they're not very good. They're not, and they don't speak our language. They don't speak the language of organics and sustainable inputs. And so that's how, and extension doesn't do it either. So basically, like, nobody is talking to us in a way that we understand. And so that's my job, is to be that in-between person to sort of, and to bring the whole thing together, because farming is not just a chemistry class, right? We've got physics and we've got biology, and all that has to work. So my point is that it's possible to have a test like this, that's basically perfect, almost perfect, and for the grower to tell me my stuff is no good. I've got problems up the wazoo. I got all kind of bug trouble. I got disease issues. I got failure to thrive. And so, well, okay, so we know it's not this, would be the next thing I would do with that person. So now you got to tell me more, because we don't have any other pieces of paper. Now only you know what's going on out there. And then we would get into, all right, soil texture and biology. What can we start to discern about the texture and the biology of the soil that's the limiting factor? Because clearly chemistry is not the limiting factor. And in fact, that may be your case, Rachel.
Yeah.
The case may be that from a chemistry standpoint, pretty much everything is there, because even the things that you're low on are not low, right? They're marginal, which means they're okay. You don't have anything on here that sucks. Yeah. There's nothing on this test that would explain anything being less than kind of perfect. And so then the issue is probably, so what's going on at your house? Sounds like air could be the limiting factor, is oxygen, oxygen in the soil. Because now you've talked to me about how heavy that clay is. And so then we would start to go down that alley. Okay, now we're going to talk about equipment. Now we're going to talk about how are you managing weeds? How are you working in your compost? Should we introduce tillage where you had been not using tillage? How can we get air in the system? Would be where we would go next, most likely.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I want to just pause right there and just open up the space and say, hey, does anybody feel called to throw something into the pot that we're stirring here and have a question or a comment or an aha moment or anything you want to throw in?
Hi. I'm just driving from taking my my dog to the vet, but I've been listening to the seminar. So a question that I had where I've tried to look up ideal soil conditions and for certain crops, and I go to the same soil person as Rachel as well, like for the soil test, like TerraLink.
Yeah.
And are there like ideal soil conditions for specific crops that you would recommend are good resources? Like, for example, if you're growing like perennials, these are the perfect soil conditions to have. Or I guess it depends on the type of perennials, but if you're growing like ranunculus, do you have access to any resources that are like crop specific soil conditions?
Good question. I think that makes 2 people on this phone call going to the vet. I'm just saying. I don't know what that means, but it's possibly important. That is hilarious. Okay. I am not a cut flower expert to that degree of specificity of like special soil conditions for certain species of flowers. And so I just would imagine that whatever some of those biggest, what's the Bible of cut flowers? What's his name? Oh, the woody guy, and it's a book like wicked thick, like I would so I would say you have to use whatever cut flower growing manuals exist in order to get that for perennials. Generally speaking, annuals, anything that you're going to grow every year, Lisianthus and zinnias and that kind of stuff, I would consider them basically the same as growing a fruiting vegetable crop like tomato, cucumber, eggplant, winter squash. It's basic, and so that means it basically wants to be in the 6s pH wise. It's going to be a pretty heavy eater of potassium. It wants high nutrition across the board. And then in terms of any other broad soil condition, yeah, it wants to be on the nice ground, right? The perennials tend to be able to deal with lower pHs. They tend to be able to deal with less fertile conditions, right? They're kind of tougher. Some of them, especially the woodies, they're used to living in the woods, right? In the part shade and so forth. So that's how that's as specific as I get, is sort of woodies, herbaceous perennials, annuals. When it gets more specific than that, I'm out. And I would rely on y'all's set of resources to get, if you're really going to go crazy planting, $1,000 worth of peonies, I would want you to get that pH pretty well known in advance. Okay. Good question. How do you say your name? Is it just like it looks?
Yeah, Thanushi.
Thanushi, nice to meet you. Thanks. Anybody else have a question at this moment? Yeah, Angela, our other vet person. Yeah.
Tony, what are you doing taking your dog to the vet too? I used to grow really close to Rachel on family farmland, so I'm used to really heavy clay. And I recently purchased my own land, and lo and behold, I didn't do a soil sample before I purchased because real estate was crazy, and I have inherited a lot of clay deposits. And so I've decided to do a lot of raised beds simply because of the clay. But in some sections, I'm not going to do raised beds. And I was hoping to go no-till. But now listening to you say to Rachel about air being an issue, and I know air was an issue for me when I was near Rachel, you could just tell when you like dug up the tubers at the end of the year.
Yep.
Are you hinting that if you have heavy clay deposits, even if you amend and top up, like I'm imagining like putting in a good 6 to 8 inches of good quality soil on top of what is existing there? Do you think that that's feasible, or I will have to use till in the areas where I'm not using raised beds?
If you're not going to put that a bunch of other stuff on the top, I would want you to, yeah, I want you to interact with the soil as it is. I want you to till it, and I really want you to test it, because I don't know about whatever the geology is in your area, but what I normally find with people on really heavy clay is that it's acid and it has no phosphorus. And the only way we're going to change pH, and the only way we're going to get phosphorus to be more than just in the top layer, if we want phosphorus to be down here, we're going to have to put it there.
Okay.
So yeah, so and I've got this in the slides, which we'll go to next, but my general message for you is you have to earn the right to go no-till. I don't think starting no-till on shit ground is a lifelong job. And as long as you never want to make money, you just go right ahead. Right? Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like if you just you're just out there tiptoeing through the tulips, having a beautiful experience, and you don't care if you make any money, then go no-till on really bad ground, because it's going to take forever. Okay. If you have economic pressure on this project, if the project is an economic project, I'm saying let's fix some shit and then pull out the tillage after we get some stuff fixed.
So you think how many years do you think of tillage is required before you can safely say, hey, now I feel like I can go no tillage?
It depends, of course, on how much, what your status is at the beginning and how much stuff you're putting in and all that stuff. But I mean, I could be 2 years only. Before it would be like you will know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so what I want to also put into the group, because this happens as well, is I had a call from a neighbor right down the street, which is very unusual. And he's like, can you come and look at my raised beds? Everything looks like shit. Okay, so I went over there. Everything looked like shit. And it's like, he said, but I've put out so much compost. Oh, it's so much compost. And I looked at it and it was like 100% compost. And it was 100% leaf mold compost. And basically there's no soil. And I said, well, honey, you gotta mix them together, because plants don't want to grow in just leaf mold only. I mean, maybe a few plants, but it's not the ones weren't no zinnias going to grow like that, and snapdragons. No. And so he actually had to go out and buy some more dirt and add it on. I was like, yeah. So there's this idea of like, you have the ingredients to make a cake. And if I were to serve to you, Paulina, I would come and say, here's chocolate cake. And it would be like an egg at the bottom, and then there would be some sugar, and then there would be flour, and then the cocoa's on top. And I would see like, here's the chocolate cake. It's all there. You'd be like, yeah, but it doesn't look like chocolate cake to me. It looks like ingredients. I want you to make cake. In order to make cake, we got to mix some stuff up, and then we want to end up with 6 to 8 inches of chocolate cake. That's the goal. And so you will know, Angela, when you are starting to get where you want to go from a physical standpoint, is when where the soil, you can interact with it, and it's penetrable. Let's put it that way. And then you're going to see how the plants are growing. The plants are going to tell you if things are good. And then you're like, okay, now we can start to back off on tillage. And so what might need to happen I would consider, Angela, I don't know how crazy bad it is at your place and what kinds of tillage might need to come into play, but there is a thing out there called a ripper or a subsoiler, are two words for kind of the same thing. And it can be just, it's like a single shank, like a giant hook that you pull through the soil that's basically creating a slit. And
Okay.
this is to go down like 12 inches. It makes a slit. It doesn't turn anything over. It's just like creating a slit through very compacted ground. And if you can follow that with some compost, tillage on the top,
Oh,
and then grow some plants, those roots will find the slit and start to like permanentize that opening into
okay.
the nether regions of the soil.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that may be
Thank
something
you
you
so very much.
could rent or borrow or whatever. Okay.
Thank you so very much. That's really helpful.
Yeah. Good. All right. Who else has got anything they want to throw on the table? I told you I'm not looking at the chat. So if there's something I need to see in there, let me know.
Ellen, I have a question.
Yeah.
Since you brought up leaf mold, I'm particularly passionate about leaf mold and
Yeah.
mulch, and I'm wondering how I could apply that in a active farm setting. You know, I've just inherited a farm that's been amended quite well, but in wetland. And it has landscaping fabric laid down on the rows, which are essential for keeping the beds shaped for the winter.
Mhm.
This land has been worked for many years and has had a lot of good amendments. I feel like we could transition into no tillage. Do you think adding a nice mulch layer would be appropriate in that circumstance, or does it still have to be incorporated?
Well, I think I would want to know what the physicality of the soil is. I would want you to tell me about what happens when you stick a shovel in it. Like, is it easy? Is it hard? What kind of color are you seeing? Is there a strong striation between, yummy dark for 3 inches and then crazy red clay underneath? So I would want more information before I would decide for sure. I love leaf mold and leaf compost. I love it the most when it's more broken down. So
Yeah.
my general overall experience with compost that is and leaf mold that's commercially available is that it's not old enough. It's not broken down enough, because why would they? If they can sell it to you at 6 months, why would they keep it for a year, right? So if the sources that you have for buying compost are kind of like that, like everything's kind of woody, it's kind of leafy, it's kind of chunky, buy it 6 months before you want to use it. Buy it a year before you want to use it, and let it keep decomposing on your property.
Okay.
The other issue with the no-till, sort of the most popular iteration of no-till that I see on social media and is all over the place, is to put that, a big fat layer of compost or leaf mold right on the top and then direct seed into that. And I hear that people are having some good results, and I also hear that some people are not having good results. And I think it would depend. There's a possibility of inviting a lot of slugs to that recipe. Can equal a lot of slugs if you live in a place that is wet a lot, which might be some of y'all live in a place where it rains like a lot. And so there's a little bit of a hesitation that I have, because slugs are attracted to undecomposed organic matter, which is leaves and hay that hasn't broken down. And so, boy, that's a really tender place for you to be. And so anytime I'm working with the grower and we just aren't sure, neither of us is feeling like 100% sure about what's the next step is, I say you're going to want to try some stuff. You know, don't do only one thing, do 3 things, do 2 things for sure, maybe 3 things, and keep really good track of what you're doing, and then see what happens and learn what's going to work for your setting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, nice.
I think Heather had a question too.
All right, Heather.
Oh, there I am. Okay.
There you are.
I am a complete beginner and just starting a season at Tualatin Farm School. We're really close to where Rachel is, I guess, more or less in terms of what the fields are looking like in the winter. And so my question is, what can you do over the winter to support good soil health in the spring? It's very, very worrying.
Okay. Yeah, your voice is breaking up just a little bit, but I think your question is, what's a good practices for the winter?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to turn on some slides because there's a little section in here that I'd like to jump into because it'll answer your question. And so pardon me while I jump around just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and just show a few slides, if that's okay. And I think it's going to get to where we want to go anyway. So let me do it like this. Okay, so that's where I used to farm. Here's what I would call the hierarchy of needs of how you think about your farm business, and your business is kind of this purple on the outside. And here's the things that you're going to spend the most and the least amount of time on, that are the most important to the least. Labor being pretty important. So these are the things you got to spend time and get this stuff right. And you really want to be spending very little time in this area, right? Okay, so let's get into the soils. This is a high tunnel with a summer cover crop in it, a summer green manure crop. How's that for sexy? That's pretty sexy. Okay, this is what we've been talking about, kind of dancing around here today, is this idea of the chemistry, the physics, and the biology, the 3-legged stool of soil. It doesn't, you know, I'm only separating them into these 3 things just to help us like grasp some concepts. None of them is working independently, right? Everything is all mushed up together, and like any other ecosystem, it's all in flux. It's all in relationship with each other. But for our attempt at understanding just a little bit what's going on, I use these 3 areas of interest: physical, chemical, and biological. We've spent some time now on the soil chemistry piece. Something happened over there. Weird. Okay, there we go. Where we talked about, why do we care about soil chemistry? We care about soil chemistry because we want yield, because I'm talking to you as cut flower growers with an economic project. We talk about soil chemistry in the sense of, we want to have lots of stems, we want to have some long and strong stems, and we want flowers with good vase life. So that's bringing calcium into the picture. We want to have really good levels of calcium that make, just like for our bodies, that gives us strong bones. Lots of calcium gives plants strong cell walls. It gives them good ability to stand up tall. And it also gives them the ability to move in the wind, to flex, but not break. So high calcium levels, like Rachel's soil test had, 70% of her base saturation was calcium. That is right on. That's perfect. Why do we care about soil physics? That's what I keep trying to, when I'm talking to you about, what does it feel like when you're out there? This is when we talk about aggregation of soil, the way that the soil is in little packages, not sand, silt, and clay unrelated to each other, but sand, silt, clay, and organic matter all mixed together and forming little communities, which we call aggregates. And the softer and the more airful, airy your soil is, the easier everything is. It just takes less energy from a tractor, less energy from your arms pulling a hoe through the soil is easier when the soil is more forgiving, more full of air. And then soil biology, which we've just been kind of dancing around in this conversation. You know, we've come to the point now where we understand that plants don't even feed themselves at all, just like us, right? We know that we're like a passive vessel almost, and the biology in our guts is what's actually feeding us. It's the same thing in the soil. The plants are just like, they're the sugar producers, and the microbes are doing all the work of getting the minerals, the water, and giving it to the plant in exchange for sugar. It's a sugar-based economy. Okay, it works great. So that's the biology piece. This is the 5 rules that I wanted to bring to your mind. These are the same rules. I don't know if this is the same in your country, but in the United States, our Soil Conservation Service, this is the mantra of sustainable agriculture, the 5 rules. Test and balance the soil, which we were talking about with our chemistry talk. Then there's the concept of tillage, organic matter, keeping the soil covered as much as possible, and then the idea of rotation. So a couple more slides here, and we're going to get to the answer. So we've talked about soil testing. We don't need to talk about that. Okay, let's talk about, and what was Heather's question was what to do in the winter. So let's go to, sorry, this is annoying, but I think it's okay. Here's the tillage piece. Is that it? Let's talk about tillage again. All right, so this is what I would call till with care. You got to have a good reason to be out there doing something. And so what we got to keep in mind is, first of all, what is tillage mean? And when people, even the people on all those damn podcasts are talking about no-till, they're still tilling, okay? They're speaking imprecisely because they're using this and they're using this. And some of them are even using this and they still say they're no-till, okay? So use your discerning, wise ears as you hear people talking. And if you have a chance to ask them, be like, oh, so how do you prepare the seed bed for your direct seeded larkspur? Oh, we go through with the tilther. Oh, okay, so you mean you till? Yeah, they till. Okay, so these are all different forms of tillage, including weed control. Using a hoe is a form of tillage. It's disturbance, it's soil disturbance. So how about we just lighten up about tillage? Okay, why do we till? And here we are. The first reason we do any tillage is to introduce air, is to bring oxygen into our situation. And why do we care about air and oxygen? And that's because those are the plants, that's the conditions that grow the kinds of plants that we want to grow. They respond to an aerobic soil condition, which means there has to be oxygen there. Yes, there are plants in the world that can grow in a swamp and that can grow completely with water on top of the ground. Those are not the plants we're growing. So I'm not making any universal statement. I'm just talking to y'all, and we're all farmers trying to grow plants and make a living, okay? So aeration is our #1 goal. Incorporation, like we were just talking about with Angela, we need to do some mixing. The soil that you have inherited or bought or whatever that you're working on is crap. and we gotta make some progress. We gotta improve it. So we need to do some mixing. When we want to grow small seeded crops, any kind of direct seeded crops that are not a big seed like corn and soybeans, we need those plants to have a fighting chance. And so we need a clean seed bed for some of those crops. We do tillage for weed control, and we do tillage for residue management, meaning like one of the, there's a word called sanitation, right? If you have a bunch of brassicas going down with certain kinds of diseases, like black rot, it's important that you do something called sanitation, which is basically like either pick up all that rotten stuff and take it away, or work it into the ground and make sure it gets all broken down by the microbes. Don't leave it on the top where it's basically going to, that reservoir of disease organisms are basically exactly where they want to be, just sitting there waiting for next spring to come back to life. So these are all the reasons, some of the most important reasons of why we till. And we know all, I took out all the slides about how come tillage is terrible, and because we're all swimming in that knowledge pretty well now about how tillage is terrible. So let's talk about how do we integrate that knowledge and be able to move forward. So key piece here, especially for y'all on this hard clay ground or difficult clay ground, is never work soil when it's wet. This is like cardinal sin number one, and everybody's going to make the mistake of doing it once. And hopefully you will never make the mistake again, because once you see how bad it is, you will be shamed into never doing it again, because you've basically can undo all the beautiful work that you've done for years by compressing the soil and squeezing all the air out. And that's what'll happen if you squeeze, drive on, somehow compact wet ground. You squeeze the air out and it takes a really long time to get it back. That's the main message I wanted to get out of this slide. I don't know if any of you, some of you are at tractor scale, so these might make sense to you. We want to, not drive more than we have to on the soil. We want to use the lightest equipment we can. And then basically these are what I would call the mitigations. Like this is how we're going to balance the ledger. So when I do a tillage, I think, okay, I did it for these reasons, and I know that I've created some downsides. I've created some, I've done some damage in a certain way. And so this is how I'm going to pay back. This is what I'm going to do as extra gifts to my soil to pay for having done those a couple of harsh practices. So I'm going to make sure to provide organic matter in a number of different ways. I'm going to grow cover crops and green manures. I'm not going to use poisons so that biology has the best chance possible. I'm going to use yummy and delicious fertilizers and amendments that are pro-biology. And I'm going to try to have plants growing as many days of the year as possible. So Heather, we're getting close to you now, because that's the answer that we're going for. Okay. Okay, you got to earn the right. Okay, so here's rules. That was tillage, very quick. Here's rules 3 and 4. Keep the soil covered and continually add organic matter. And basically these practices, the same practices fall kind of under both of those rules. So I just glue them together. So we want to plant cover crops religiously. That's, Heather, that's what I'm going to say to you. This is a hard sell. I understand that growing cover crops on a small scale over winter is a situation. It presents its challenges. I'm going to try to convince you that it's worth it for you to overcome those challenges, because this is really the best thing there is to do, is to grow plants over the winter. Are we good?
Is there a way, if your fields are quite wet in the winter, is there still hope for cover cropping if it's very...
Well, the question then is, can you get the seeds in before it's too wet? Correct?
Yeah.
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 So the issue is, can you get the seeds in before it's too wet? And the answer is maybe. And the answer is, I would like you to try. Not every single crop. So this becomes then a question of production, and what are your production practices? You know, how much do you have to lift up a whole lot of landscape cloth, you know, in order to have the soil exposed at all? How are you going to deal with all the plant matter that's on top of the ground? Are you going to cut it off and take it away? Are you going to shred it up and till it in? So I understand there's a bunch of issues at play. And so it's what I want to say to you, Heather, is it's not a zero-sum game. It's not all or nothing. I'm sure there are some places in your garden or property where you can get a great cover crop in time. Because not every crop you have is going to go until after frost. You're right. And you're not going to harvest it up till Thanksgiving. And so what I'm going to invite you to do is to do a really good job of, as soon as a crop is done and you're finished with that patch, that field, that row, that bed, get that residue out of there and plant the cover crop like today. Like it's, so when you think I'm done with that patch, it doesn't mean it falls off the list. It just goes on a different list. And the different list is hurry up, get some cover crop. That's the list that goes on next. And you once you start to institutionalize that kind of thinking and procedure, then it just becomes normal. Like, yeah, it just becomes normal. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's excellent. Are there any particular cover crops that are good for annual flowers?
The answer to what cover crops are good for you is specific to your bioregion and your, so I don't care. No, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. Just whatever's going to grow, and then whatever you can deal with in the following spring.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you, I would say, don't grow rye and let it get away from you and have it end up being 6 feet tall, because it's going to be hella hard to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So, but generally speaking, we would want to have a grass and a legume. That would be sort of your core nice mix, is two things: some kind of grass, wheat or barley, and some kind of legume, crimson clover or vetch. Those are kind of the main ones that I think would go across most of our bioregions. And then if you want to get fancy, you start adding more things to that: peas and other kinds of grass, and maybe some mustards or something. But two things is pretty sexy compared to nothing, right? So, you know what I mean? Don't hold yourself to, like, if it's not 16 species, I'm not going to bother. Like, one species, I'm excited, okay? Just get started doing it, even if it's just 1 or 2 or 3 beds at a time, okay? And then be ready to deal with it. Yeah.
Ellen, may I add something?
Yeah.
Heather, I messaged everybody in the chat because, and Rachel probably knows, on Westham Island and behind the mall, because I grew in that area as well, lots of the farmers use cover crops, and oftentimes it's to protect other crops, because is it the geese or the duck, Rachel, that like go in and eat it? So it's honestly, it's sometimes just for are they ducks? What are they again?
It's both. It's widgeon at night and it's geese in the daytime. Actually, geese at night too.
Yeah, so
Wow.
if you go around, like Rachel probably knows what they grow and what works in that kind of heavy clay, but like if you drive off of the Westham Island Bridge in the wintertime, a lot of the farmers there are growing cover crops.
Nice.
But a lot of it gets eaten down by the ducks and geese
Yeah.
all winter. And so there might actually not look like there's anything there because they've eaten it, but there's still roots in the soil. And sometimes they can bounce back in the spring and take off again. But that's one of the hardest parts about cover cropping here is that that biomass doesn't accumulate because the geese eat it all to the ground. But then they also poop as they go. So maybe that helps.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. At least you're getting the poop side.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. There you go. That's what you need is local knowledge. So you don't have to be talking to a hippie flower grower to get this information. The regular guys know about this too, right? The regular farms that you see as you drive down the road. Extension, they know, or whatever you guys have there. People who work for the government, they know about what cover crops might grow and which ones maybe the birds don't like or whatever. Couple more slides, unless we have another question, right?
One
Teresa,
comment,
yeah.
Ellen. Unfortunately, extension services don't really exist in Canada.
Yeah, okay. Which is why I'm here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Kirsten, so does the cover crop get dug under in the spring? Okay, so let's talk about, let me see if I have a picture that works. Here we go. I didn't really have the main answer to this question. I took those slides out. You're gonna have to deal with that residue one way or another. And so that means you could tarp it. So this could be your cover crop if you were lucky. This would be beautiful. This is wheat or barley and vetch. And if you're not a person who uses tarps, you would mow it and you would till it in. And that's what you do. If you're a person who doesn't want to use a tiller at this moment in time, you would mow it and you would put the tarp over the top. And then 3-4 weeks later, theoretically, it will have kind of melted down underneath. But they both take time. This probably takes just a little bit more time to do it the tarping way. Now, still, yeah, so you're gonna have to do something. And that's the part that's the hardest. Getting it planted is like super achievable. Now you're gonna have to know that it's sitting there waiting for you. But my point in this slide is that I am working with people who are saying they're putting this cloth on like at the end of the fall and leaving it all winter long. And that is making me a little bit sad. Right? So if I can't believe that anyway, I'm just saying, honey, green plants is this is how the world works. This is how the earth works, is plants grow and they feed microbes. And if your ground is going to have a piece of plastic sheet over top of it for 6 months of the year, all in the name of soil biology, I don't really think that's going to work out. Because soil, what are they eating? What are they eating? I don't see any sugar. There's no sugar there. So I really would hope that you can, even if you can't figure it out for every crop, but you'll find that with certain of your species, you're going to have time to get them out of the ground and get this cover crop planted. So give it a shot. Anything else that people have on their minds? Or I don't know what other slides I got, but mowing is crucial. You're going to need something to mow with, even if it's a weed eater, if you're at a small scale. You got to buzz it down and then either work it in or tarp it. Danushi, you have a question? Maybe.
Yeah, so one of the questions I had, well, I have several, I guess, because I'm looking at what Rachel's soil test was and what we talked about versus what I got from TerraLink as well. But if you had to increase your phosphorus and potassium, phosphorus, from what I understand, it stays in its spot. So if our nitrogen's high, and you have beds in a greenhouse, would it just be like adding the fertilizer that's high in phosphorus and potassium right into where you're going to be planting? Is that the best way?
I'm more in the roots go everywhere kind of a camp. And I'm more about sort of spreading the fertilizer throughout the main growing space instead of just down the row.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That may, I'm not saying that just putting it down the row is not going to work, but I am saying that I would really like to invite those roots to keep going out and finding more yummy stuff. And so I like the idea of fertilizing in a broader area, like the whole bed is my favorite.
Is there a way to do it just as a foliar feed, as a like, let's say things are growing and you're kind of noticing things are looking a little bit stunted, which we noticed in the field last year. Is like, could you add phosphorus and potassium through a foliar feed that's effective? Because I know you can make like your own organic stuff from, let's say, buttercup or whatnot, but I don't know whether it's more effective and time worth your time to just like invest into, I don't know, or maybe give up, or like add the foliar feed to at least help the crops that season.
Yeah, here's my take on working with foliars. They are expensive, the ingredients themselves, they take a lot of time, and you live in a place where it rains like hell. So I would consider foliars as like icing on the cake or emergency medicine. I wouldn't want foliars to be like the cake. I want you to work on the cake using sort of traditional organic practices, which is build the soil, let the soil feed the plant. Okay, I think that's a good like foundation to create. And then on top of that foundation, you can mess around with some foliars, but I don't think you're going to be able to deliver phosphorus through a foliar system and ever get enough. You can top off the tank with foliars, but you can't replace having your soil system functioning well biologically and having lots of nutrients in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Good questions.
Ellen, there's also a question in the chat from Melissa. Have you had any luck with perennial cover crops? For example, mammoth red clover, thinking of trying it with one of the dahlia beds.
Melissa, are you able to speak? Are you able to unmute?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm understanding exactly what
Well,
you're
so
asking.
you're speaking of cover crops that you either, you kill at the end of the season and then, or sorry, in the spring, and then you, but what about keeping the cover crop going and planting your crop directly into it, right? I'm using dahlia tubers, so in which case I'm obviously going to dig into the soil.
Yep.
But dahlias, generally speaking, other than the slugs issue, could probably put up with growing through another crop.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just thinking about compaction in the soil, for example.
I think I'm interested in you finding out if that might work. And I think what I would want to do is take that clover crop, like cut it some, and get it like a little bit less bossy and robust, like make it short, put your dahlias in, and then see what happens.
Okay.
And again, I wouldn't do it on the whole farm till you know how it's going to go, but I am very curious about how that would work. And if your core soil foundation is pretty good, right, Melissa, this is not year one, you're not on concrete, you're not on this horrible undraining clay. If you have pretty decent ground, I think it could work.
Yeah, I was just working with Joe from Root Shoot Soils, and that was one of her recommendations. But I was just curious to see if anybody else had done that with that particular crop. So, yeah, we'll see.
You'll see. Okay. Good idea. Good question. I mean, that's the kind of thing that, you know, in sort of bigger scale agriculture would be like, nobody can figure it out, right? So nobody's even talking about it. And where folks like you, maybe Melissa, are on a smaller scale and you could actually figure out how to try it, you know, and I'm interested to hear how that works out. What else is on anybody's mind? We're just about at our end.
I can ask another question if no one else has a question.
Go for it.
If you notice, so something that's happened in our greenhouse is there's quite a bit of botrytis on ranunculus, and I planted Lizzie's, and I noticed botrytis on there as well, even though we are venting. But I'm wondering, like, if you know something like that is present, is there anything that you can do from a soil perspective to also prevent more fungal disease spreading in like a, I don't know, in a closed off area that's like
Yeah.
not outdoors?
Yeah. So let's think about, you know, as organic growers, we are our first level of defense is a good offense. Our first level of defense is growing strong plants, right? Just like the way how you're going to deal with not getting sick as a human is you're going to take care of yourself. You're going to sleep and you're going to eat well and you're going to brush your teeth and you're going to do this preventative maintenance so that your body is able to fight off invaders, right? So we use that same idea in organics with our plants. And so then we're back to setting the foundation well in the soil. I would particularly look at the copper levels in your soil. I'm of the opinion that you would want to have copper up in the 5 to 10 parts per million range, and that the plant has plenty of copper to do its own fighting of fungal diseases. So we want to do that preventative thing. And then there's the whole environmental issue of, you know, basically we're doing this crazy balancing act. And we're trying to grow a plant that probably doesn't want to be there. We're trying to grow at a time where it doesn't want to live. And you know what I mean? And like we're asking a lot of this plant. And so I would then get into the environmentals of ventilation. Maybe your plant spacing is off. Maybe you are overwintering, like we talked about before. Maybe you're overwintering plant material that has already got botrytis spores on it, you know, and so you're basically have pre-inoculated your crop for problems. So there's a lot of little pieces that could go into overall trying to reduce the incidence of botrytis in your patch. And then comes, you know, once you have it, are there things you can do to try to, you know, dampen it down? So, you know, and so these answers are getting more specific and more expensive and kind of more reactive, as opposed to the early answers are this preventative maintenance, trying to create a condition under which the plant will thrive. So that's kind of how we attack any of these pest and disease issues, is kind of that from that whole spectrum of what have we set things up well to begin with, and then when is our system starting to fail? What have we done wrong? that botrytis is the winner. And every so often, you know, just to put it out there, because I've been around a long time, every so often there's a crop that's just not going to work for you. Like, you know, some crops are just divas, right? And they just require so much hand holding and so much prissy behavior that you just think, you know what, you're off the list. I don't care how cute you are. I can't speak the language of ranunculus, whatever it is, or lisianthus, you know, and you just take it off your list and stop fighting a losing battle. You know, not everybody can grow everything everywhere. You know, there are some things that are just really hard, you know, so I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I'm hopefully that gives you some power
Yeah,
to
thank
decide some things.
I have a copy of the book we were talking about earlier.
Ah,
There we go. Woody Cut Stems, Blaine Greer, and
John Dole. Yeah, John Dole is the king of Woodies.
So
That's the name. I kept thinking Duke, but it wasn't Duke. It's Dole.
No.
That's the name.
And it's thick. It's there's a few pictures in the middle, but yeah, it's dense.
Yeah. Well, y'all, I think we're at our time.
Yeah, I think so. That was so great, Ellen.
So we
Thank
didn't
you.
hardly do any slides, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah, that was really good. And I guess if anyone has any burning questions, you can send them to me and I can forward them to Ellen. And we'll send out the recording as well as the Ellen slide deck too. And your slide
Oh
deck,
yeah, you can have the whole deck.
it looks awesome. It was so great. It was such a treat to have you here, and also to have people engaged. It makes it so much more interesting and fun, and I feel like I learn a lot more. So thanks for doing that, everyone.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree that, and I'm just going to throw in my last piece of advice, even though you didn't ask. You guys are the best resource for each other, right? I mean, there's hardly anybody out there who is going to know more than you know collectively. So the more you talk to each other, the better it's all going to be for everybody, because the university doesn't know, and even if they did, they're not going to tell you. And you know what I mean? Like, you guys are the pioneers, so you just keep doing it and keep talking about it and keep trying to write down, like, keep track of what you think you're learning so that you can compare it to somebody else's learnings, and then you're like, oh, okay, now we see a pattern. So that's a little ding, a little bell ringing for some record keeping. This is the kind of record keeping that everybody can get behind, which is learning from my mistakes and then sharing your mistakes and your victories with your comrades till we all get better and better and better at this. Yay. Okay,
Great.
I'm done.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much, Ellen. That was really awesome. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Ellen. That was great.
So good to
It
see
was.
you all. Thank you for coming to visit on a beautiful, for me, rainy
Yeah.
Wednesday.
It is.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, well, thanks so much. And Ellen, we'll talk to you soon.
Sure. All right, y'all. Have a good
All
day.
right. Thank you.
A good season. Maybe I'll see you in real life next year.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.